So this is a passage from Liszt Sonetto 104. I don't personally play this piece, but I'm helping someone work out this passage, figure out the fingering, and then practice it in a way where very quickly he can get this up to speed. So let's get started. I just thought that this would be useful information, even though I know many of you are not learning this piece and probably will not be learning this piece. This passage is made up of a pretty simple arpeggio that is also including steps. So instead of just leaps, it has a step. And it has these turnarounds. And I think you can find this in other repertoire as well. And also this process can shed light on how I decide on which fingers to use for the notes and how to practice it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to pay attention to this passage to look for patterns, because this is a good indicator of areas where I could use the same fingering so that there's a sense of organization, and that's always helpful. So immediately when I look at the notes going upwards, by looking at the pitches that are being repeated, the first thing that comes to mind is E. I notice that these groups of four are repeated up by octave. So we first start with this turnaround, and then once we get to the E, this is a solid pattern up to the top. So let's start right there. I am choosing to mainly use 1, 2, 3, 4 here, even the turnaround here, because I find that passages going up like this, sometimes using the fifth finger requires your elbows to pivot this way, and I find that a bit cumbersome. If you look at my hand this way, how the fingers are pointed in this direction, it's rather natural to play these notes up on top with fingers 3 and 4 because they're longer, and so it's comfortable. So I'm choosing to repeat 1, 2, 3, 4. So once we're at the top, here it gets a little interesting. The score has these groups in 3, and I don't really notice a pattern that is very consistent based on those groups of 3. So I'm going to look at groups of 4. And it's not the same, but to me, orally, there's some consistency there. Really, the pattern for me would be to pay attention to the semitones here. The pattern is in groups of 6, but I actually probably will not choose to go with a fingering that's in groups of 6, because this would be a viable option. 5, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. So if you were to just repeat that, I think that works, but for some reason I just don't feel comfortable repeating that 2-1 figure so fast while covering that very close semitone from 1 to 5. So I actually will backtrack and go with the groups of 4. And this way, even though the pitches are different and the shapes are slightly different, I have a consistency with the fingering. I will be using 5, 2, 3, 1. 5, 2, 3, 1, 5, 2, 3, 1, 5, 2, 3, 1. And this is something that I will need to practice because it doesn't come very naturally, because the notes are different. Sometimes it's starting from a white key, sometimes on a black key. We'll talk more about how to practice it in a bit. Let's move on for now to take care of the rest of the fingering. Once we finish with this F double sharp, or a G by pitch, the natural thing to do is to start the G sharp with finger 2. And there's no real good reason to start with another finger. So just look at the logical logical clues that tell you where your fingers are naturally placed when you're about to play the next note. This will give you a pretty good idea of which fingers will be comfortable and reliable to use for each passage. Okay, so from G sharp, I'm choosing 2, 3, 1, 2, 5, because I view this bit from G sharp to E as one micro group. We're all going upwards, and I would probably identify 2 further groups within it, a fourth, and then this block, an octave plus a major third here. And by identifying those 2 positions, I can find the fingering, because playing these notes is just a matter of breaking up these chords in interval. And that's how I come up with 2, 3, 1, 2, 5. And then here, this is a simple turnaround. It's a little more complicated because we have that grace note. And instead of just using 2, 2, because depending on the piano, you can easily get stuck if you do that, unless you have really a lot of sensitivity at the tips of your fingers, I'm going to go with 1, 2, 1, 4, and just repeat or change that finger there. And that's rather straightforward. Now that we have the fingering, let's move on to how to practice this. I will focus on taking care of the transitions, and in order to do that, I'm going to go with groups of 5 notes at a time, because the fingering that I chose is in groups of 4, more or less. And by playing 5 notes at a time, I am taking care of one group and then the first note of the next group. So just making that transition. So I'll just do that, going from one group to the next. And of course, I'll be using the fingerings that I'll be using eventually. So here's an example of something that is slightly more difficult and awkward, because this 1 to 5 here, I was trying to avoid that earlier, but there's really, I chose a fingering that still has it. But anyway, to work around that, because it's not really a big deal if you let go of the thumb. That's what I'll be focusing on. So I'll be focusing on the separation. At the speed that you're going to play it in eventually, that separation actually is to your advantage. It adds clarity. And it doesn't sound like you are actually separating it. And I'll just repeat that until I feel comfortable. And then, let's see. Here I will make an exception to the 5 notes. I will work on this transition, 2, 3, 1. Because once I get to the 1, it's like a zipper. Like all of the notes follow through. Here, these 3 notes should be comfortable because you're used to treating those 3 as a group. Now, speaking of hand positions, I would also block out these chords. Try to find hand positions where you can take care of many of the notes within just one span, where you're not moving around, where you're not shifting over. So in this case, this bit, this is more or less your hand position. I would break it up further, like so, or just play it all 4 notes like this. Just get comfortable with that. And then also coming down, I would probably group it in groups of 2 notes at a time. And again, just to emphasize the purpose of doing this, when you're used to playing these intervals like this, playing the actual notes is just a matter of separating what you just practiced. And if you take it in these steps, when you're actually playing the notes, you're not focused on going from one note to the next note, to the next note, to the next note, but rather one group and then taking care of those fingers and then moving on to the next position or group. Sometimes it is pretty useful to look for other anchor points. In this case, I'm looking at the octave here from G sharp to G sharp. and also using the index finger for both. So these kind of serve as spotters. I'm thinking about other things and just in a tactile way being aware of other aspects of this pattern, but this is a further layer to pay attention to. And just having many ways of looking at it and understanding it and remembering it will help you play it because it gives you that security. So we've been working in groups of 4, but the left hand is following groups of 3 in the right hand. So I might just practice that. The left hand here is actually not too complicated. I might just hop over and repeat 1, 3 for the 6th interval here, or use 1, 2 like so. I don't know. I think both are reliable. And then for this one, I will probably go 2, 5, 1, 3, and then 1, 2. So this feels more comfortable. I would follow your instinct for a lot of these fingering issues as well. So once you practice just the left hand, just practice that bit. Don't worry about the rest until it's comfortable, and start to let go of the 4 groups of 4 that you were practicing before, or whatever grouping in context, because you don't want to be stuck emphasizing the pattern. In addition, I'm also identifying certain points where both hands align together just to give me anchor points. So for example, I'm paying attention to this 6th here with this D sharp. So I'll just pay attention to that. And also here, the thumb plus the 5th. Things like that I would take note of. In this case, the precise alignment of both hands is probably not as clinical, and it's probably stylistically appropriate to have it slightly off because this is a sort of an embellishment, a long embellishment at the end of this phrase. So those are my tips. I hope this is helpful. I hope you can apply it to your own practicing whatever piece you are playing and learning currently, and I'll see you very soon.